Good, beautiful morning. Happy new moon in Libra. Happy Venus retrograde. Yes, happy retrograde. I know a lot of people get terrified by the word retrograde, but retrogrades are good. It's when the planet moves a little back and we're given some space to review some things. We're usually getting some really powerful upgrades. So usually I do a little spiel on the new moon because I love working with the new moon. I've been working with the new moon for years. It's such a powerful way to harness the energies of the lunar cycles, which is, and the new moon, all about beginning a new cycle. It's giving us an opportunity each month to start things anew and to be given that turbo boost. And as I prepare for my new moon cacao ceremony and sound bath tonight, I've been ruminating about what some of the astrologers that I admire have been saying about this time and the things that I've been ruminating over. And this idea, this concept that I've talked about and played with for years, the warrior of love, just came to me as a good subject to talk about. So let me start by saying that the word warrior is quite triggering. And on my first album, Crystal Hymns, I actually have a song called Love is Warrior. And that actually came from some channeled teachings of Jesus. You can take those for what you will, but in it, Jesus said love is warrior. Not a warrior, but warrior. And I've actually had a few people not really enjoy the fact that I called this is very challenging for people to think about as a concept, as even an archetype. And I get that. I mean, when you look at the story of our humanity, especially in the last 100 years or so, the warrior archetype has been a very toxic, broken, wounded resource for our consciousness. It's, you just think about the wars that we've seen in the 20th century alone. They're absolutely terrible. How many millions and millions of mostly young men perished. And the kind of technology that we unleashed on ourselves with atomic weapons and such. Of course, World War I with the gas attacks. It's really hard to think about the warrior in that noble way. But if one harkens or has had the blessed experience of working with Native American or First Nation teachers, you know, in their ceremonies, in their whole mythology, the idea of the warrior is very precious to them. But they're, of course, speaking to a much less unsullied concept of the warrior. And in the work that I do with the masculine, particularly the Jungian archetypes, the warrior archetype is profound to study and to investigate, particularly when you see the fullness or the nobility of the warrior. And such things that perhaps none of us really connect to the warrior, but the noble aspects of the warrior is foremost someone who is on a very sacred mission and is very aimed and devoted to that mission. The warrior is that aspect of us that is unwavering on that mission. That warrior thus is protecting us against anything that would sully that mission. A warrior is someone who's very, electric with their intent, very electric in their purpose. And a warrior is also a disciple of that mission, and thus the word discipline comes from that. The working of skills and such that will harness their excellent, keeping their mind clear, their body strong, and their heart skillfully compassionate. And there's a beautiful, concept of the warrior in Japan with the samurai warriors. There's a beautiful movie as well called The Seventh Samurai, and perhaps more popular for people is The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise, although I know Tom Cruise is not everyone's cup of tea. But that's a very beautiful movie because what you're witnessing is kind of the more broken warrior archetype from the West, played by Tom Cruise as a Civil War veteran who's literally dealing with all this incredible trauma of the horrors that he's seen and the massacres of Native Americans that has never really sat well with him. And then being taken hostage by this samurai tribe in Japan and getting to know, how they go about interacting with this warrior energy, which is a lot of mindfulness meditation and living a life filled with harmony and order and prayer and nobility. And he eventually, is rebirthed into this more sacred warrior archetype. We need the warrior archetype right now, and it's a big thing in the astrology of our galaxy right now, because Chiron is moving through Aries over the next decade, and I mentioned this before. And what that is Chiron is the wounded healer moving into Aries, which is the warrior and the masculine. And for the next 10 years or so, this concept of the sacred warrior or the noble warrior is something that I think is going to start gaining a lot more traction in our culture, because we really do need to be roused into a heroic kind of consciousness. And the warrior always gives us a fighting chance. Doesn't matter if we're facing Goliath or we're those 300 Spartans against like thousands and thousands of Persians. The warrior gives us that opportunity to always have a fighting chance. It has that defiant hope that we have something incredible within us. Through discipline and such, we know that we have a genius that can be really brought online increasingly, and we can bring that to the fore with whatever struggles we're dealing with in our life. In Chinese medicine, they have this beautiful concept called the returning current, which is actually the name of the 7th point on the kidney meridian. And the idea of the returning current is no matter how far you go off the path, no matter how far wayward you may go from what you think is good in your life, there's always this returning current of energy that you can just latch onto, and then in one intentional breath, whoo, you're back. You're back in your presence. You're back in that innate goodness and that beauty that you are. So how do we fit then the warrior with the love? So what's that all about? Well, let me start by telling a story. So something that I know a lot of people are getting interested in is this whole concept of shadow work, which is working more with the unconscious patterning of our consciousness, because there's a lot of the aspects of ourself that is in the dark, and a lot of that is in the dark because of trauma when we're young, suffering intense experiences, and we literally hide and fragment parts of ourselves in this kind of darkness within ourselves. But from that darkness, these very deep unconscious forces are still alive, and they somehow, or they often will come back and reel back and take control of our being, leading to addictions and these like kind of primal urges that create confusion within us. Like, why am I doing that? Or that self-destructive tendency. And a lot of it is due to the fact that there's parts of ourselves that just haven't been loved back into the integrity of our wholeness. So they're kind of in this murky place of self-torment and suffering. And the work of shadow work is shining a light on those aspects of ourselves and cajoling them and encouraging them to come back into a state of wholeness, to join the merriment of what we really are. And also recognizing that those fragmented parts of ourselves are tremendous sources of beauty and power and love and identity that we really need to restore, and we really need to bring back together. Now, I know a lot of us, are really suffering. As Buddha said, suffering is like kind of the first stage of learning the path of enlightenment. And, those of us who are leading a spiritual life, especially those of us who are, in this modern world with social media and the whole Vanity Fair of Instagram and Facebook and such, we can get really lost in the image making of things. And there's some really beautiful shamanic teachings just about this whole concept of image making, the idea of making your identity through the mechanism of the ego appear a certain way, being pretentious or appearing something that you are not. And I think we need to really pause and take a moment to look at technology and be aware that there's something very dangerous that can happen, especially if one is living a spiritual life, in the displaying of things. And my gosh, I'm not innocent in this as well, but, taking pictures of rituals, meditation, prayer, endlessly, kind of parading oneself as a spiritual person. Even though that could be very authentic. I mean, I've taken pictures of rituals where I'm like, yeah, that feels really authentic. But in the moment, I reflect back, I'm like, it was kind of bizarre that I picked up my phone and took a photo of my ritual. Kind of bizarre. And in one way, I kind of justify it as, hey, you know what? We're in an age where we really do need spirituality to gain a lot more momentum in the mainstream. And I think it's good for people to witness these kinds of things that are happening, because things like rituals and such, it's like really eternal practices of spirit that have long been persecuted. And I think it's time for us to really show those things. But in the showing, we always have to be careful. As the samurai say, you always have to keep the sword closest to your own throat. You always have to think about, okay, is this the right time to do this? And really kind of measure, what am I gaining? What's my real intention? To really be intentional about these things. So there's that, and dealing with the fact that we are all fairly wounded, no matter what kind of spiritual practices one does or how enlightened one thinks. I mean, how many stories do we have to hear of spiritual teachers or gurus whose wounds all of a sudden get exposed and they do something really horrendous that people are utterly shocked by? I think that's why, I call myself a spiritual teacher, but if someone would ask me what a spiritual teacher is, my main response would be a really good friend. A spiritual teacher is not someone who's supposed to be perfect by any means. In some ways, I think a spiritual teacher should be someone who's trying to forge their integrity, to kind of inspire others to witness what is possible with spiritual practices, to gain more excellence, to awaken more of our genetic code, if you will, to really show like human beings can become so much more glorious than the way we've been conditioned by our society. And that's really what I want to talk about now, is that in the suffering that we're all going through, I had some insights this week, because I've been going through my own cycles with patterns and stuff that I've been really trying to release and falling back, and then finding the resiliency to keep going and not shame myself too much. And I had this moment this week of really acknowledging like, wow, it's really tough to be alive in this age, with right now what is going on the planet. I mean, we've literally just stepped out of the dark age. Those dark ages in Western civilization that started maybe, 500-600 years ago. Well, we're just stepping out of that. And if one really looks at all the mechanisms of control, whether it's like the technology that's surveying us, the poisons in our food, the ravaging of our environment with radiation through, Wi-Fi and cell phone towers, and I mean, it's really, and then you just look at like cultural conditioning, the manipulations of pop culture and what it's done to women with the objectification of women, and then the repression of male sexuality and the twisting of it, and putting, conditioning men to be these kind of macho men and not in touch with their feminine, and all the self-destructive tendencies happen to men there and their high suicide rates. I mean, we're really fucked with. We're really fucked with from the moment we're born in this culture. And I don't have to jump down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories and the Illuminati and all of that. I think most people are aware of these things now, that there's a lot of systems that are in place to oppress us. There's a war on consciousness, as Graham Hancock calls it. And one thing about the warrior is the warrior takes stock, the sober taking stock of what we're up against, to give us that, proper analysis of like, okay, this is what we're dealing with. And I don't think a lot of us really take into account how tough things are on the planet right now. Now, I'm a defiant optimist, and there's lots of amazing, beautiful things going on. Mayan prophecies, ninth wave of unity consciousness. Don't get me wrong. There's incredible support that we need to harness to bring forth this real evolution of the revolution. But that being said, I think we do have to take a look at the world and just be like, when we're feeling down, when we fall into addictive patterns or what have you, instead of shaming ourselves and beating ourselves up because we've read a bunch of spiritual books, we're like, man, I should be like Jesus. Just recognize what we're waking up in is kind of like a nightmare. And there's going to be collateral damage. You're going to take hits. You're going to be wounded by this world. I think of Willem Dafoe in the movie Platoon, if you've seen that movie about the Vietnam War, and he's running to the helicopter, after, fighting in this horrendous battle, and he's just getting hit by all these bullets, but he just keeps getting up, and he keeps running to the helicopter, keeps getting hit, and there's that iconic photo of him, like, with his arms raised like Jesus on the ground as he's just getting nailed. And I kind of see it that way, of what we're dealing with in this age that we've woken up to now, where we are literally confronting tyrannies that are very ancient. And we've got so much support. Like, I have no question in my mind we are going to overcome this. But I believe the time that we've been incarnated in, it's not necessarily a time to be just like, a full perfect rainbow being. This is a time to get messy, to get dirty, and then to know skillfully through disciplines of the warrior how to support oneself, to keep being resilient, how to know how to call on your community. If you've been, following me and you know me, the last 2 months of my life, I've gone through just a massive amount of grief and pain. And, I give myself a pat on the back. I've had friends that I've called. I've, displayed my helplessness. I've been vulnerable. And that's been really the power that's transformed me. And big shout out to all my beautiful friends who have held me and cradled me. And at any point that I need to call them, they were there for me. I couldn't have done this without you. And we can't do this without each other. This is like momentous. We're literally turning the wheel back, from thousands and thousands of years of oppression. And I'll do a talk at Alternity some point in the fall all about the Gnostic idea, the ancient idea of where this oppression comes from. It's a bit of a rabbit hole, but we're up against, as shamans say, a kind of predatory entity in consciousness. And the beautiful thing, though, is right now prophecy says that the goddess that is Earth, Gaia or Sophia, is truly waking up to help us overthrow and liberate the true glory of our soul. But we're really in that point of transformation right now. So where does love come into play? Well, warrior of love. We need love more than ever right now. If you are a watcher of the media, especially since Donald Trump came into power, the media is trying to desperately divide us. It wants us to hate each other. It wants men to hate women, women to hate men, races, race wars. I mean, there's a lot of hate going around, and you're witnessing it in the streets now. You're witnessing, especially in America, people yelling at each other, confronting each other angrily, and there's not a lot of skillfulness being held in a lot of those conversations. I just finished the presence process, and there's a beautiful chapter about forgiveness. And in this chapter, Michael Brown basically says, when someone acts out in a way that isn't wholesome, it's not that we become timid and we allow that person to walk over us. We can still confront them. We can still draw a line. But we need to come from an original intention of knowing that this person, just like us, was a little child one day, and that the person they've become as an adult that may be reprehensible to us has become that adult through a series of experiences and sufferings that have molded them into who they are. And largely trauma, usually, especially if someone is dealing with a sociopath or even a psychopath that's been cut off of their ability to witness and be kind to another human being and to know that oneness and to know that from their innate goodness, really. So, whenever you meet someone who's, pissing you off or is a tyrant, just know that those people are especially traumatized because we are innately good. All the scriptures, all the great mystics say that we are innately good. So before you trumpet about, how someone needs to be shut down I've seen a lot of crazy stuff on social media these days with some of the things that are going on in politics, and I'm just shocked at how the vitriol that's coming out of people and the lack of love. And this is the thing. Love is a mystery, okay? We don't really know what this word means. And we're part of a beautiful collective exploration, upgrading of what that word means. For me, if I may be so bold, love is basically the energy of oneness. It's the energy in the heart, which all the ancient traditions like Taoism say the heart is the rendezvous point of heaven and earth. The heart chakra is the upward facing triangle, the downward facing triangle. It is the place where we know that we are unified with everything, with the cosmic field that is all, with every single person, with everything, plant, every animal, every particle. We are somehow native all together to that cosmic energy. That's truly what love is. That deep, profound knowingness. And that's why things like meditation and spiritual practice are so important, because we live in a world that's very much, I could say an opposition. I don't even know if it's intentional. I just think it's kind of this unconscious, like it teaches us to be fragmented and to be separated from each other, which is an illusion, which is the Maya. So love is the force that comes forward and says, no, this person over here who's acting out in such a way, they're still a part of my tribe. They're still a part of my family. So if you come from that place, how is that going to change the way you interact and engage that person, especially if that person is doing something very vile, even violent? This is why I draw a lot of inspiration in my life from people like Gandhi, Martin Luther King, even Malcolm X, in the later years of his life, even Joanna Macy, the beautiful eco-spiritual philosopher. We really need to be warriors of love, to merge that discipline, that purpose, that ferocity, that aggression that wants to go and call out people and call them to a higher standard, but then bringing in the love, a powerful force of unity that will then integrate with that ferocity and bring something even more profound to the fore. This is kind of, in a way, the sacred marriage within us, and this is kind of what the Aries Chiron thing is all about, because we have the masculine, which is really that aggressive warrior energy, and then the feminine, which is more of that soft, mothering tenderness. And how can they really coexist? And this is kind of the inquiry and the question that I want all of us to really explore and to contemplate in our life, and really contemplate it. This is deep stuff. These are deep philosophical concepts that we really, really need to figure out and talk about together, because love and the warrior, they really need to be combined now more than ever, especially if we're going to really, turn things around on this planet. We don't want to create more division. And as crazy as it might sound, and this is the thing, I think why people have a lot of hard difficulties with this whole concept of loving thy enemy, is that we just don't do it. It's such a rare thing to see. I mean, how many people have witnessed an episode in their life, where someone was super angry and someone was able to use loving tenderness to actually soften that person's anger and to call forth the goodness of their soul, to be almost kind of like a walking alchemist to that person. Probably not very often, but if you have witnessed episodes of that in your life, I'm sure those are probably some of the most unforgettable memories you've ever seen. So I want to tell you a little story about my life. So when I was living in China years ago, I was just getting interested in nonviolence. I was studying a lot of Gandhi. I was very new to my spiritual path, but I was super ardent. I was super passionate, very disciplined. I was doing martial arts. I was meditating every day. I was in my prayers. And I really had this real zest, this really warrior of love zest. Everywhere I go, I felt like I was so present. If anyone needed me, I'd be of service, whether even if I was just getting coffee at a coffee shop. I had this amazing just energy about me that I just wanted to help and be of service and to give and to give and to give. And that's truly one of the boons when we do the shadow work, because when you really overcome a lot of your suffering, and I think suffering is kind of endless in a way, because once you deal with your own, you could be dealing with the collective. But once you really get into an integrity with yourself, then it's all about giving. Then it's all about, okay, my stuff's kind of dealt with. I just want to give now the beauty in my soul to others in service. So I'm at a bar this one night, and during these spiritual times of my life, I wasn't really drinking that much alcohol for this one period of about a year. So I'd go to a bar, and I'd literally just order one drink, and I'd just sip it all night long. And it was great. My friends would get loaded and stuff, but I was just so present, I was able to just adapt to any circumstances that was before me. And at one point, I went over to the dance floor, and there was a friend of mine who was super drunk, and he was incredibly angry. And he was like pointing at the dance floor and yelling at someone. And this was a friend of mine that I didn't know too well, but he was a French-Canadian guy. He was kind of like into gangster rap, so he had that kind of like machismo about himself, but he was a really lovely guy. But here I saw him just like filled with rage, and he was just like pointing at someone, yelling over all this loud music as if he wanted to kill someone. So I saw the situation. I'm like, whew, okay, I'm a warrior of love. I got to do something here. And Gandhi says, if you're going to go confront someone and try and be that force of warrior love, first thing you got to agree upon is that you may get hit. You're going to put yourself out there as a sacrifice. You may even get killed. This is what the warrior love says. Gandhi was like, if you're going to join me in the cause of nonviolence, you're going to like stand in front of this tyrannical empire of the British Imperial Army, and you're not willing to die. You're willing to use violence instead of just sitting there and take these hits. I don't want you. That's how crazy courageous Gandhi was. So I take a moment to breathe. I'm like, yep, I'm willing to get punched. I'm willing to take a hit. I can do this. So I walk over to the dance floor, and I put my hand on my friend's shoulder, and I say his name. I'm like, hey man, what's going on? He turns to me. First thing that comes out of his mouth is the N word, that really bad word that people call black people. He says, that N is dancing with my girl. And he points at a friend of mine, an African friend of mine, and this Russian friend of mine, who I both know. Didn't know they were a couple. Maybe they were just hooking up. But I didn't know that my friend obviously had a crush on this girl. So I'm like, oh, and he's really drunk and not dealing with his emotions. And he starts like leveling all this anger at both of them and how he wants to kill them, and just, very terrible. So I, allow that to be vented. Because the thing you'll know about anger cannot be held for very long. And this is the problem. When people are angry and you get angry back at them, you feed it. And then this vampire thing happens, and then it just becomes explosive. If someone's angry and you actually hold a space and just allow it, not all the time, but often, it'll just needs a space to be vented. So he goes on this tirade for a couple minutes, and then he has a sigh that comes out. A sigh. And I noticed with a sigh that, okay, there's a space. He can't hold this energy any longer. I come at him, I point at him, and I start yelling even louder than him. Gandhi actually says that you have to be angrier at the violence itself than the person holding the violence. You have to be so angry at the violence, how disgusting it is for a human being to even think of hurting another person physically in that way, even verbally. You have to be so angry at how negative, how destructive that is, and overpower them, really dominate them in that goodness. So I start yelling at him, but my yelling is from love and compassion. It's right looking in his eyes, and I say, brother, this is not you. This is not your noble heart. Like, I know you're better than this. This is not how you want to deal with the situation. And he's immediately like taken aback, like, whoa, this guy's like way angrier than me. Like, what? And at that point, it was kind of humorous. Three of his friends like converged around us quickly, and they tried to break us up because they thought we were getting into a fight. And I looked all of his friends in the eye, and I said, I got this, I got this, I got this, don't worry. And then I come back to my friend, and he's sort of, putting his defenses up now, because he's like, oh, Darren's really angry, I'm going to get angry again. So I notice he wants to come back with his anger. So I give him space again, and he comes back. Right away, I notice his anger isn't as powerful as it was the first time. So I know that, okay, something's transforming. This is great. And then I let him, do his thing. He vents for a couple minutes. And then I come back at him with my fury of love and goodness. And he's wearing a Buddhist medallion, and I grab his medallion and I say, brother, this is who you really are. Like, the way you're acting right now, I should take this off of you. Come on, you're better than this. And finally, he reaches a point where all of that anger just goes away. And it's like he's like a little boy almost. And he speaks in this very soft voice. He says, okay, please, like, what do I have to do? I say, let's go. So I take him outside and we get out of the situation. And we end up standing outside, and we have this beautiful conversation, and he relates his pain, and he thanks me so much. He didn't know what had possessed him. He was drunk. And then his friends come out, and they're just like, what the hell was that? Oh my God, it was so powerful to witness. This is the warrior of love. This is what we really need to bring to the fore right now. The part of us that knows that no matter what, every human being is good. And that if we have the skills and the know-how and the soul power, as Gandhi said it, the presence of mind, the courage, the fearlessness to work through all the pretense of ego, all the horrendous, because all anger and fury and even, the bad toxic war it's just a defense mechanism. A person not wanting to be loved. And probably a person dealing with the fact that they weren't loved when they were a child, and that made them very, very angry. I'm going to close very soon, but I wanted to share on that note the whole idea of Satan or Lucifer, the evil one in Western Christian mythology. So I've thought a lot about the nature of evil, and I'm writing a book on that. Who knows at what point it'll come out. I'm writing like 5 books right now. But I've thought long and hard about this, because as a human being who's of a philosophical bent, a lover of wisdom, this is the type of things you think about, like, why is there evil in the world? So I've sat long and hard with this whole idea of Satan and Lucifer and what it means. And from the story that I've been told, Lucifer was like the head angel, like the top of the angels. And when God created humans, he said to Lucifer, okay, you got to serve these guys. And probably elaborated like, they're new around here, they need to be taught. They need to be, shown what's going on. We're told that Lucifer got angry at God and was jealous. Envy was the first sin that Lucifer fell, which caused him to fall. Now that's a very masculine interpretation of it. So if we bring in the feminine, this is what I've got to. Jealousy is based on a lack of worth, a feeling of lack of worthiness, that you would look at someone else and be like, that person's better than me. Hogwash. We're all unique. No one's better than anyone else. We're all unique in our frequencies. So in that moment, what I see happen is the anger was really hiding the sadness, because the root of anger is sadness in Chinese medicine. And the true sadness that Lucifer felt in that moment was he folded his arms, he said, God doesn't love me as much anymore. God loves these humans more than me. And he had this very vulnerable, innocent moment of sadness. And instead of really sitting with that and going to God and being like, God, I don't think you love me anymore, he fell into this kind of typical, shadowy masculine cycle of like, you don't love me anymore, screw you, and created this war that we're still dealing with apparently to this day. So with that understanding in mind, really the pain of Lucifer is an incorrection, or something that needs to be corrected, an incorrect understanding of reality that we've all gone through, especially when we're raised by our parents. Our parents were doing the best that they could, but let's face it, there's generational lines and lines and lines of trauma that may go back to this whole mythological story of Lucifer. We haven't really learned to be loved properly by others. Our parents didn't love us properly. They didn't fill us with the unconditional love that we truly needed. Now, I'm not saying that our parents are to blame for anything, because no one else is supposed to be the source of your unconditional love. You are the source of your unconditional love. You don't need anyone else. But because we've lost that concept in our culture, because we've been cut off from the mysticism and the spiritual truths of this, we've been, endlessly creating this pain cycle of getting to, as we progress in our lives, feeling like this deep wound of like, I'm not loved. And then blaming our parents and all these other people. No, you got to reach a point where you realize, oh, I have to do that work within myself to become my own mother and father. Something a lot of, traditional cultures knew a lot about. And that's why they had initiation ceremonies and such. To draw you from childhood to adulthood was like a very key transition point. And they had to give you these sort of how to be self-governing, how to be self-directed, how to be self-loving. This is where I'm trying to tie this all back together. So when we look at any kind of evil in the world, it's really just the cry of the unloved. And we have to recognize that people who don't feel loved, and we know this because we've all gone through those periods in our life, when you don't feel loved, is there any worse pain? Truly. If you actually constellate all the times you felt depressed, even anxious, suicidal ideation, you name it, the whole gamut of things. We live in a culture of all these over-specialization. We forget the general, overview. The overview is all those things are connected to this one source of not feeling loved. And then the dilemma is we know that. And then this wound, this bleeding wound of not being loved, when we actually get down to that, it's horrifying to witness. And then we really feel like my soul is just fundamentally broken. Truly what should happen in that moment, what needs to happen is we should realize, oh, wait a second. I can love myself. My heart is this glorious, super powerful, mysterious, enigmatic, temple of soul power and wellspring of eternal, unconditional love, I can actually heal that wound and bring that heart. Well, not even bring the heart back to wholeness. The heart is always in wholeness. This is a funny thing. I wrote once, what do you need to mend? What breaks really only bends. Because if you look at things on a fractal quantum level, nothing really breaks. The heart doesn't break. It may feel like it's broken, but that's more probably egotistical, limited self-beliefs that are breaking to hopefully, through suffering, get you into that point where you tap out and be like, there must be another way. And then hopefully then you're saved by your own heart that comes forward and says, yeah, I'm your savior. You are the savior. So when we look at someone who's acting out, whether it's Satan or whoever you want to hate in the world, I want you to think about the fact that this person doesn't feel loved and they haven't figured out how to love themselves, and that's made them angry. That suffering is the greatest suffering that we can feel as human beings, and they may unleash a whole war on the planet based on that. It's insane, but it's true. It's absolutely true. So we have to start first to find that love within ourselves, to love ourselves. And self-love, it's almost like corny nowadays, self-love, everyone's all about self-love. I think that's great. But understand that loving oneself is the most profound thing and relationship in your whole life. And it's not easy. It's complex. It's a voyage. It's a journey. It's going to take a lot of skill. It's going to take a lot of discipline. This is where spirituality does become a bit of a boot camp. Thank you, Jesse Stewart. And we need to upgrade, our powers. And as the warrior, really take stock of where we're really at. Get vulnerable. Realize, okay, you know what? I'm doing all the spiritual work, all these certificates, but I'm still not, I haven't figured out how to really have that beautiful relationship with myself where I can be alone, where I can feel fulfilled in my own presence. Instead of chasing around other people to fill that love, to fill that void, which always, always leads to tragedy. And then when you find that love within yourself, the power that you'll feel, the true power, you'll realize what true power really is. Because all those tyrants who amass all that money, all that material power, they're all going to be suffering on their deathbed. But you could have a humble person who really figured out how to love himself or their self and loved others. Because when you truly figure out how to love yourself and you feel like, and you realize, oh, this is like an eternal resource, you're going to feel good a lot of the time. And you're just going to want to share that good. That person's going to have dozens, hundreds, thousands of people at their funeral with tears in their eyes. Whereas the tyrant may have as many people at the funeral. No one's going to be really crying. Maybe a few in their inner circle who maybe really knew about the vulnerabilities going on in that tyrant's soul. So you tell me, what is real power in this world? And this is the potential before us. So the next time you feel like hating on someone, I want you to take a moment and think about that person as a little child. And to think about, what did they go through in their life to bring them to this place of being such a reprehensible human being in your eyes? And if you can muster a sense of that love and send it to that person, don't analyze it, just send them love, unconditional love. Hold them in unconditional love and just see what happens, see how you respond. And again, this isn't about being timid. This is about actually going up to the tyrants, directly confronting them and saying, I fucking love you, and I know there's goodness in your soul, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to call that out. I'm going to call the beautiful lovingness that is buried under all that trauma, all that pain that has dissuaded you from being a good-natured human being that I know you really are. I know that essence because I know it within myself, and I know it's the essence of all that is in this universe. I'm not going anywhere. You can kill me, you can punch me in the face, you can push me around. I'm going to keep coming back. Care Bear staring that love at you. Because this is what it's really about. This is how we're really going to change things on a planet. If we try and change someone or even like take someone out via anger and such, the pattern's not going to shift. It's just going to come back. It's going to be relentless, relentless, relentless. Yeah, I need to hear this too, Megan. So, be with these energies. Venus retrograde, Aries Chiron. This is what the universe is wanting of us. Trust me, I've been studying this stuff for years. This is what I'm seeing. These are the patterns. This is our birthright, to be warriors of love. So wishing you all beautiful self. Spend some time today, love yourself. Do the presence process by Michael Brown, 10 weeks. Oh, it'll change so much in your life. I just came out of it. I'm going to start doing it again soon. Might actually make a call out if people want to join me online and do some solidarity work around that. And just a last shout out. November 11th, Remembrance Day. I've got some really big news upcoming. It's not official yet, but looks like I may be doing a beautiful ceremonial concert at Beach United Church, all about the rise of the sacred warrior. So touching upon all of this through songs, poetry, music, and it'll be just by donation. So yeah, so spend some time tonight in ritual, power up, new moon. If you're coming to the cacao ceremony, I'll see you this evening. It is sold out, so sorry if you want to come. I tell people it sells out every time. You got to jump on this stuff, and it's beautiful to see people are hungry for doing this work in community, doing ritual. Yeah, and I see you, Sarah. I know you're selling out your stuff too. It's like a soup kitchen out there. People just want to be fed, and it's so glorious to be in that service and then to be fed by others as well. It's great just to witness how deep people want to go now with their lives. We are turning a dark age to light. Be also easy with yourself. Find that steadfast balance, new moon in Libra, that balance point where you can like rally yourself, to do better in the face of like a fall, whatever that means. But don't go so far that you overwhelm yourself and make yourself feel ashamed. It's a very precise balance to find. And like I said at the beginning, we've really incarnated in a bit of a nightmare on this planet, and we're at that point where the pivot point of dark age to light. But we're going to take hits. We're going to get wounded. This is not work of just living out a life of utmost purity. You can vie for that, and that's great. Always keep that goal. We should be purifying ourselves in the earth. But we're dealing with, cleansing so much toxicity on the planet, transforming it, really alchemizing it. And it's not going to be perfect. So don't shoot for perfection, because that's just going to lead you a bit into disappointment and regret and shame. And just pull on each other. I'm there for you. People come to me for one-on-ones. Yeah, let's support each other. This is a big thing we're doing on the planet. Love and glory to you all.